Before you give me your opinion, I'd like you to share with the jury what that opinion is based on.
Sure. So it's based on the 130 slides you've seen. It's based on my personal inspection of the Lexus, the correlation of the text stream data with the infotainment data, as well as Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone data. It's looking at, I guess, where the taillight wasn't broken. It's looking at the physical evidence at the scene in terms of taillight fragments, glass fragments, red color in the snow. We have the cell phone data, the location and position of the arm lacerations, the air temperature at the time indicative of sufficient to freeze, the location of the fracture on the back of his head relative to the scientific literature, my testing of forces available falling onto a hard surface, published science on the fracture forces associated with falls.
Well, hey, folks, there are days in a courtroom that feel like a slow burn, incremental, procedural, forgettable in many ways. But then there are days that jolt you, days that force you to kind of reevaluate what you thought you knew. And for me, day 21 in the Karen Reed murder trial was one of those days. Because if Dr. Judson Welcher's testimony is accurate, if the science he presented holds up under scrutiny, then we might be looking at a narrative that moves us far beyond that tragic accident to not necessarily a murder in the traditional sense, not a premeditated hit, unless you think it was. But today's testimony pointed to something I think is more calculated than the defense might want the jury or the public to believe. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil. I'm Mike King, and today we're diving into one of the most pivotal moments in the Karen Reed murder trial, in my opinion. Now, I'm in the mountains, but thanks to Starlink, I've been listening to the trial all day long, cutting wood and trying to get it burned as the summer comes along. Well, as we get started, I hope you'll take a moment and hit the like and subscribe button and make sure that you have notifications turned on. And please invite your friends to join up at Profiling Evil. But let's separate the science from the suspicion and maybe, just maybe, shift the way that you and I are seeing this case. Now, Dr. Judson Welcher, this guy doesn't just have swagger. He doesn't just speculate. He builds. He's a biomechanical engineer with over 30 years of experience, and he's conducted more than 1,200, that's 1,200 crash tests. He trained at Texas A&M. He's published in peer-reviewed journals, and he even constructed experimental setups for an amusement park ride safety study. Now, his lab is data-driven. His conclusions aren't based on gut feelings. They're based on math, on physics, and injury biomechanics. So when he stepped into the courtroom on day 21, he didn't bring emotion. This guy brought 141 slides in a PowerPoint presentation. He brought a replica of Karen Reed's Lexus and animations built from 3D laser scans of that entire crime scene. And what he showed next changed the temperature in the room, at least for me. And I'd really like to know your thoughts down below of whether it did for you or if it's maybe part of this conspiracy theory. One more person weighing in on the conspiracy. Now, Welcher's most powerful contribution, again, wasn't his resume. It was the way that he lined up the injuries on John O'Keefe's body with specific, scientifically verified points of contact with that Lexus RX 350.
Contact image of the transfers onto my arm. Actually, the yellow paint you can see from my hand is here. This is from the arm and forearm Here's the paint transfer pattern.
And that slide number,
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Welcher?
I'm terrible with that.
That's
Slide
okay.
116 now, that was 115.
Thank you.
Slide 116. What I've done is I've taken these yellow lines to show the extension of the components on the rear of the exemplar Lexus. Then I've done this extension of those same components on the rear of Miss Reed's Lexus and shown how the approximate location of the fractures in the taillight match up with the approximate location of the contact of the arm onto the taillight.
Now, the deep contusions and bone injuries on O'Keefe's left forearm have a lot of us questioning, dog, fight, but it aligned perfectly with the passenger side tail light assembly. His right knee trauma? Well, that met with the lower bumper edge, consistent with being struck from behind. The bruising on his hip and flank? Right at the bumper's midline. And that blunt force trauma? That matched the upper rear hatch in the window glass area, the fin of that vehicle. And that fin may have added to that wind tunnel that was created behind the vehicle. If you go back and watch my earlier video where we talk about why that hair could have remained on the vehicle. Now, Dr. Welcher didn't theorize. He used mannequin models, full-scale replicas, and a 3D overlay to demonstrate how each injury correlated with specific points of contact. It wasn't hypothetical, it was geometric, and it was repeatable, and perhaps most chilling is it was persuasive. And when Dr. Welcher paints, people should be listening. In this particular case, the paint doesn't appear to lie, and it proved his point, something that he acted out. Now, this wasn't courtroom theatrics, in my opinion. Welcher took a factory-painted bumper section, similar in age and color to Reed's Lexus, and he physically dragged a similarly weighted dummy wearing a coat identical to John O'Keefe's across it. The result? The same red paint streaks and fiber embedding found on O'Keefe's jacket. That matched. So those marks on the coat matched where those fibers were and other kinds of things on the vehicle. Now, visually it matched and microscopically it matched. And I think that coat told a story, one that couldn't be explained away as incidental contact. Now, this is where Welcher walks the jury through the replication experiment that visually and microscopically linked to fibers found in John O'Keefe's jacket, reinforcing his conclusion that the taillight damage occurred during impact with O'Keefe, not from another source like a prior vehicle bump or one later in the day.
When you were asked to engage in the study, were you ever asked to reach a certain conclusion?
Never.
Was there ever any influence other than the data and facts on your analysis?
There's never been any influence. The influence, again, it's whatever the data shows.
When you engaged in whatever studies you undertook that you'll explain to the jury, were you given any direction or limitations on what you could or should do?
No.
When you received the information, did you understand, regardless of the result, it would be provided to everybody?
I guess generally, yes. I mean, I go through the data, I give you the results, you do with them whatever you see fit.
Okay. And in this case, when you decided to engage in that study, had you had an opportunity to review the ring video footage from Mr. O'Keefe's home on the morning of January 29, 2022?
Yes.
Tell us how you went through your study, how you began, and the steps you took, please.
Sure. Probably be best on the slides. So one of the things we first did was to get an exemplar Lexus. What does exemplar mean? It just means I got the same exact year, make, and model vehicle as Miss Reed. So Miss Reed's vehicle is on the left-hand side, taken during my inspection. And then I found this exact same year, make, model, manufactured at the same plant, everything Lexus in Texas. So even though it looks like a European plate, it's a Texas plate. Purchased the vehicle, had it shipped out to California. So I verified that the Lexus is in fact the one I got, the same exact one as Miss Reed's. These are all the standard equipment. Miss Reed's is on the left. My exemplar is on the right. It says Reed Lexus TIS, that's Toyota Information Services, or Toyota Information System. So I ran it through TIS, which is the umbrella program under which TechStream runs. I also ran it through My Lexus, which is the Lexus website. And then started about doing what's referred to as a photogrammetric analysis of the video.
Can you explain to us what a help me with the word, photogrammetry?
Photogrammatic. We're doing photogrammetry is a photogrammetric analysis.
What does that mean?
It's just a big fancy word to saying you're looking at data in photographs, and what we're trying to do is take two-dimensional images, say you get from video or photographs, and knowing some information about the photographs and some of the dimensions of things in the image, get or convert it to a three-dimensional space. In other words, be able to get exact three-dimensional measurements out of that two-dimensional image. So I had the video, just to show the provided video that I was given. So Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. I don't know if you noticed, but there actually is contact between the vehicles. So one of the first things we wanted to do is determine the frame rate, which is how many video frames are played per second. Your normal kind of video camera has about 30 frames per second. Your standard movie is 25 frames a second. You know, a modern IMAX is like 60 frames a second. The frame rate of the camera, how many images it shows per second, because video and films are just single images played really fast, so it looks like motion. And so determining the time between each frame tells you how much time occurred. So if we know the time between each frame, and then we can figure out how far the vehicle moved, distance divided by time is speed. So we put it through a couple different programs. This is called AMP5. We got 19 frames a second. This is a specific forensic program called Axon Investigate, 19.8 frames a second. This is a publicly available program called FFMS. Same thing, 19.8 frames a second. Another program, Media Info, 19.8 frames a second. Anyways, 5 different sources, we're getting 19.8 frames a second. So then what we've done is add information now. So now that we know how many seconds each frame represents, we now put a clock back in to tie that into time. So it's the same exact video, except we have a frame counter now, and we have a time. So we have some information now on the time between each frame. So here's frame 0. This is frame 265. We're 13 seconds into it. Here's frame 305. Notice you see brake lights on the back wall here. Notice how they're not super red because you still have reverse lights on. Now they all go off. So the Lexus brake lights have been turned off at frame 353. 356. Lexus brake lights begin to come on. 357, they're back on. Lexus comes to a complete stop at frame 369. 384, the reverse lights turn off. So now look how red this is because we no longer have the white reverse lights in it. And you can see the Lexus starts to drive forward. So frame 825, this is after the Lexus has left the scene. But notice the tracks in the snow. So we have very definitive locations for the wheels of the Lexus. We lay over a grid on the various frames. So we then took the images and did what's called clarification, which is where you overlay images from multiple versions or multiple views of the same vehicle, and it helps sharpen the image, but it slightly dulls the color. So you get a little cleaner, crisper image. So here's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle before clarification, after clarification.
Excuse me, Your Honor, pardon my interruption. Could we get numbers of the slides as we're toggling back and forth? Sure. Which one is next?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll make an effort. So slide 76. You're welcome. Going to slide 77. We're going to focus in on this area here. So what we will actually show is where the snow was displaced in these two spots. Spots right across from here and right across from here. If you could focus your attention on those. Slide 77. So slide 78. To bring us all together, we went out to Mr. O'Keefe's residence and took a scan, a laser scan. So you see the laser scanner over here. Laser scanner is right here. Fence hasn't changed position. The camera's changed a slight position. We can account for that. So here's the subject video. We have the correct resolution. There's a new camera. It's going slightly faster frame rate. That just means we have different times between frames on the new camera, but we're simply using it for calibration to the old camera. It's the same container for the MP4, and it's using the same video codec. A video codec is how the computer encodes the video.
That's slide number, please.
Oh, yes, thank you, Your Honor. Slide 79. Slide 79, part 2. So really, we care most about is the resolution. So slide 80, you can see these are what are called control points. So from the laser scan, we locate these various points. So the 3D scanner knows the exact position of all these points on slide 80 in the image. And so what we can do is use this information in conjunction with the video to create a scaled version of the video. So when we have three-dimensional images or three-dimensional measurements, we can then use that to give us some three-dimensional information from our 2D video. So there's the points on slide 81. Slide 82, slide 81, second part, we're basically just fading in. So what you see now, if I go back to the beginning of slide 81, this is the picture from the video camera. And then what you see here is, which is barely any difference, and that's because what we've done is we've now overlaid the points from the laser scan. So now each one of these little speckly points, we know the exact 3D coordinates of those. So we can now know the exact position of all these fence posts, all the positions on the driveway, and we can use that to calibrate. Going to slide 82. So using that information, it's called solving for the camera. We verify that we have appropriate residuals, meaning we don't have too much error. Slide 83. Okay, subject video. Then this is the subject video with the control points overlaid on it. That's a subject video where we're phasing in the laser scans of the scene, 84. So this is both on slide 84. I'm just toggling between the point cloud and the video. And what I'm trying to illustrate is how well we were able to overlay the point cloud onto the video data. So, for example, if you say watch one of these fence post points up here while I toggle between the video there's a laser scan, there's the video. So we've done a good job. Again, the residuals show that we've done an adequate job of matching the data. Slide 85. So what I'm doing here is toggling between, this is the video of the car. And remember I told you I went out and I inspected Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle and did a laser scan of it? So we're now taking that laser scan of the video, or excuse me, of the vehicle, and overlaying it onto the car in the video. So this is the video image. That's the laser scan laid on top of it. So we know all the dimensions in the laser scan. We know all the dimensions in the scene of this. We have the tire tracks. We can create and take data points along the tire tracks. Create a map of those. So green is the right rear. Again, the vehicle's backing out, coming, slide 87, coming out this direction, backing here, stopping, pulling. Pulling forward towards the bottom of the screen. Backing out here, pulling forward like here. Slide 88. So this is the Lexus lined up. This is when the Lexus has come to a complete stop. So this would be maximum engagement. Again, this is just toggling frame 88, showing that we have the time and the frame number. 369 on the same slide. We've now overlaid the Lexus laser scans on top of the image of the Lexus. So there's the video image, a still image that we took from the video. And here's where we overlay the laser scan of the Lexus. So we've overlaid the laser scan of the Lexus onto the Lexus. We've overlaid the laser scan of the Chevrolet onto the Chevrolet. And we've overlaid the laser scan of the scene onto the scene. So now what that allows us to do, we now know the position of everything in there. And we've also tracked the position of the tire tracks. So that's what it looks like if you overlay the computer model of Ms. Reed's vehicle onto the tire tracks.
Slide number, please.
Oh, my apologies, Your Honor.
That's okay.
Slide 89, and then I'm just toggling slide 89 where I turn the vehicle off so you can see how the tire positions match up. Another toggle of slide 89. The tire positions line up with where the end of the snow was. From all that information, again, we lined it up in the video, we lined it up in the scene, we have the two vehicles. We can get the exact position of the vehicles when that Lexus stopped. So when that Lexus stopped, that's going to be the maximum engagement. So from that information, we can get the angle of the vehicle, we can get the degree of overlap, the impact configuration, and it's hard to see because of the angles and because these vehicles are not at right angles to each other, the exact contact. Now, I mentioned, and we're on slide 94 now, that contact on the rear of the Chevy Traverse. So you can see we actually, I mean, you can't see. So we took a whole bunch of data points within those two areas where the snow got dislodged, and we're looking at where that is. So if you look at that on the vehicle, so this is where it is on the rear of Mr. O'Keefe's Chevrolet. You can see it's about 25 and a half inches above ground, 32 and a half inches above ground. Here's Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. So these marks are kind of this is the Chevy Traverse words, are approximately right here. Again, I had the opportunity to inspect Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. There's no damage where these marks are. So sure, it knocked the snow off, but it wasn't sufficient to cause damage to his vehicle. We then mapped that data onto Ms. Reed's vehicle to look at where that height is. So you can see the only contact marks are down at the bumper level. I mentioned how that bumper sticks out. This is exactly where you'd expect it. So the only evidence of contact is nowhere near the upper tail light. I emphasize the word upper tail light because it is right in line with the lower tail light, but yet the lower tail light also was not broken. So again, 25 and a half, that's 24 right here, 25 and a half. That's 24 right here, 25, 25 and a half. That's right where that scuff mark was. It's also right at, again, the level at the top of that light. This light is not broken. I've looked at the front of it, I've looked at the back of it, I've looked all around it. It's not broken, and it sticks out further than the light above it. So using those positions, matching the overlay of the vehicles, we can get the speeds from that. We know where the Lexus is. We know how much time it is between each frame. So we know how far it moved. And so what we know is that when it first came to a stop, right before that, it was going about 0.7 miles per hour. So realistically, somewhere between a half to 1 mile an hour, just to account for some variations, but definitely going 1 mile an hour or less at impact.
Slide number, please.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Slide 99. That's the dimensions. Slide 102. Similar to what I said, no damage to that light, no damage to Mr. O'Keefe's Traverse in that area. And then if I could, I would like to go back because I realized I skipped over something. So this is slide 85. So this is Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle before contact. Huh. I don't know what happened this time. The slide shows that there was snow here, now there's no snow there.
Dr. Welcher, did you look on the driveway after the touching between the two cars to see if you could see anything on the snow at the back of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle?
So referring to this slide, this is after the Lexus has pulled away. Looking in the snow, I see nothing in the snow.
Were you looking for anything in particular?
Of course I was. I was looking for taillight fragments.
In any of the videos that you have that show Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle after the defendant's Lexus touches it, do you ever see any remnants or shards or fragments of taillight on the ground?
I do not.
When you did your analysis and study, trying to include or exclude this touching as the source of damage to the defendant's Lexus rear right taillight, did you consider speed as part of that analysis?
I did.
Did
I
you
considered speed, and then again, knowing we have the positions of the vehicle, we looked at the degree of overlap, and there's only about 2 to 3 millimeters of overlap between the vehicles, which is insufficient to cause the tail light that's recessed in from the edge on the right rear of the Lexus to contact the rear of the Chevrolet.
Considering all the data and analysis that you did you come to a conclusion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the right rear taillight of Miss Reed's Lexus was broken or damaged during the contact with Mr. O'Keefe's car at around 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022?
That impact did not break or crack that taillight.
Is that your opinion?
That's my opinion.
Is that to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty?
That's to a high degree of engineering certainty.
Now, it wasn't just contact, it was movement. He was using GPS and Lexus TechStream data, and Welcher reconstructed the vehicle's exact path on the night of John O'Keefe's death. Now, according to his model, Karen Reed drove forward approximately 52 feet after dropping O'Keefe off at the house. Then she stopped.
Scroll over a couple of columns. From your data, can you tell during that event how far the Lexus traveled during
Yes.
that event?
Yes.
And how do you do that?
So we have accelerometer data, we have velocity data or speed data back here. I've corrected for what you see down here is, and I go through this on a later slide, but right here you can see a significant increase in RPMs, but yet the acceleration is dropping. So what that means is if your RPMs are going up and the speed's going up, that means you should be accelerating more. But what happens because the acceleration is dropping, that means what's actually happened is the wheel's slipping. So what I've done is I've used the accelerometers data to calculate the speed once the vehicle is put into reverse. And once we know the speed, again, feet per second, we know every data point is half a second. So speed times time tells you how far you moved. Feet per second, feet divided by seconds times seconds gives you feet. That's how far you went. So you get how far you went in each interval, then you get the total distance traveled. And so this is relative to the start. So 0 is the start. The vehicle goes forward about 34 feet. Then you can see it basically stops in this area here, then begins to back up and ends up backing a total of 53 back from where it originally started. So if you add 53 to 34, you get 87. So the total motion, 34 forward, 53 back, the Lexus moved 87 feet total.
Dr. Welcher, when you say the Lexus moved 83 feet total, is that according to the data or is that the entirety of the movement of that Lexus?
No, that's just from when the data starts to when the data ends. So if you look at when the data starts, you can see that the vehicle is actually going 13.67 miles an hour. When the data stops, the vehicle is still going 23 miles an hour. And you can see,
I'm sorry.
you can still see that it's still at 74% throttle. So, you know, this is 3/4 of full throttle in reverse.
So to start with the distance traveled, if you can go to the top, we see that the speed is 13.67. Is that where the data gets picked up?
That's where the first data point is. Again, the trigger is here. This is 5 seconds before the trigger.
Are you able to tell how fast or slow the vehicle is traveling before that data point of 5 seconds before the trigger?
No.
And likewise, on the bottom, the speed. At the end of the 10-second data points at 23.61, can you tell whether or not that speed stayed the same, increased, or decreased?
I mean, considering you're at 74% throttle, it likely increased. How much, I don't know. And you can see that up here, she's on the brake. Down here, she's not on the brake. And so she's not on the brake and at 74% throttle.
And what is the percentage of throttle that has to be initiated to cause a triggering event?
For a shift into rear and a rapid throttle application, it's 30%.
If you look at the next column over, if you can go to the top heading for the jury to see the engine RPM data, could you explain that?
Sure, again, that's the engine RPMs. And so, as I mentioned, you have this jump in engine RPMs and a very dramatic jump in the reported speed of the vehicle. But when you look at the acceleration is actually dropping. So again, that's a telltale sign that the tire is spinning because the vehicle is not being accelerated. And so I've used the accelerometer data. Again, if you just, a process called integration, you integrate the accelerometer data, it will give you the velocity. So what I've done is, it's called piecewise integration to get the speed data that takes into account the tire slippage, and from there calculated the speed or the position at each interval going across the top here.
If I could stop you at your column that says JBW speed at each time step.
Yep.
If you go to the bottom, please. So does your data indicate that the speed is changing at the end of this 10-second event?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain.
Is the speed changing at the end of this event?
Yes.
How so?
Well, again, you can see it's increased about 2.7 miles per hour. And again, we know from what I already stated that that last time step, you're still at 74% throttle and you have zero brake application.
Is it possible from the data to tell how far the Lexus went forward before it went in reverse in total as far as feet?
Not in total, no. We just have this 10-second window. I can tell you what it did during this 10-second window.
Is it possible to tell how far it continued after the data?
No.
The shift position changes from 1 to 0 to 2. Can you again explain to us what that means?
Sure, 1 is drive, 0 is neutral, 2 is reverse. And then brake switch status, again, a 1 is you're on the brake pedal, enough to activate the brake lights, 0 is you're off the brake pedal.
Each one of those indicators, 1, 0, 2, how much time is for each of those?
0.5 seconds.
So can you tell how long the Lexus was in neutral for?
So again, it only occurs at one time step. And again, there's a little timing issue, like we only have data every half second. You don't know exactly where in that time it was.
Now, according to testimony today, after stopping, the engine revved as she shifted into reverse and then traveled 38 feet backward past her original starting point, or 87 feet-ish, 87-ish, in the same direction as where O'Keefe's body was found. Now, if all of this is true, it can't be classified as your average three-point turn. This was a deliberate maneuver. And here's why it matters. If O'Keefe was already behind that vehicle, then this reversal placed him directly in her path. The injuries, the paint, the reverse lights, all of it points to a physical collision during that reverse. And yes, there was snow, and it was dark, and yes, emotions were high. But remember, if the data's correct, she drove forward 50 feet after letting him out of the car, stops, revs the engine as she's putting the vehicle into reverse, and then backs a total of more than 80 feet before O'Keefe is allegedly struck. That's nearly 30 yards on an American football field. That's a long distance. Now, this might be the most important piece of real estate in this trial, and it's the thing that really got me thinking about this case, because it didn't go from a sudden backing out and I just let him out and turning around. It went from going 50 feet, stopping, physically putting that vehicle in reverse and racing backwards until she, if everything's correct, hit John O'Keefe. Now, if you've followed this trial, you also know the name of Shannon Burgess, and I went after Shannon Burgess on my show. He's become radioactive. Now, after being discredited for allegedly exaggerating his qualifications, Burgess's role in calculating the Lexus data was thrown into question. But even Welcher, after adjusting his timeline based on Burgess's May 8th recalibration, found something really unsettling. The Lexus's key event code, it was 1162.2, was now retimed to occur right as John O'Keefe's phone locked for the last time. So why does that matter? Because it suggests that by the time John O'Keefe's phone stopped being used, he was already injured and laying on the cold, snowy ground. The event that triggered the data point very likely is the reverse maneuver that struck him. And the irony is a discredited expert may have still helped narrow down that window of truth. But let's talk for a moment about drunk decisions and sober accountability, because Karen Reed has publicly admitted that she was drunk that night. Now, there was no blood alcohol level drawn on her until later in the day, but if she didn't have anything to drink in the hours between last seeing John O'Keefe and getting tested, and I haven't heard any testimony that suggests that she went and had a drink, she was still way over the legal blood alcohol level. She was drunk as far as driving is concerned. This isn't in dispute. It's not in dispute that she'd been drinking heavily that night. So here's the science. Alcohol narrows the visual field. It delays reaction times. It clouds decision making, and it increases risk tolerance. It also impairs a driver's ability to detect hazards. Now, Dr. Welcher's testimony was clear. The physics required force. The damage matched her vehicle, and the trajectory put her Lexus in direct conflict with John O'Keefe. This wasn't the slow roll of somebody nudging a snowbank. It was a full-sized SUV reversing through maybe 87 or more feet of uncertainty, with alcohol in the driver's system and a human being in the path of that vehicle. Now, it may not have been a decision to kill, but it was a decision to drive drunk. And science tells us that drunk decisions are still decisions. Which leaves us with the ever-present elephant in the room: public perception versus scientific proof, and the fact that nobody trusts the investigators. From that missing video footage to the bungled handling of physical evidence, the public confidence in this prosecution is hanging by a thread. And people are angry. They see a cover-up. And to be clear, I believe that some of that anger is justified. But the risk is that the public distrust of law enforcement may blind us to something else entirely: credible, scientific evidence that John O'Keefe was struck by Karen Reed's vehicle. It doesn't absolve the cops. It doesn't erase misconduct. But it reminds us that two things can be true at the same time: that the investigation could be flawed, but the science can still be right. Day 21 was a pivot point. It didn't answer every question, but it raised 1,000 new ones, real ones for me. And in my opinion, it pushed us out of the drunken accident category into something a little heavier.
Okay, Dr. Welcher, let me ask you again. Based on your analysis, data available, reviews, study, based on the fact that you are an accident reconstructionist and a biomedical engineer, have you reached an opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. John O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.
Yes.
And could you share the bases of your opinion before I ask you your ultimate opinion?
Sure. So again, you've seen my slide presentation. I've inspected the Lexus. I've looked at where it wasn't damaged. I've inspected the taillight. I got an exemplar Lexus. I ran lower speed contacts to verify that the injury pattern and location on the arm is consistent with the height and orientation of the taillight. I have looked at fracture tolerance data for falling backwards onto hard surfaces. I've looked at the metrics of where his injuries were and what injuries he didn't sustain. I've looked at the cell phone data, and then I've looked at Miss Reed's interviews as well.
Based on all the evidence you considered, could you share with the jury what your opinion is to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about whether the defendant's Lexus struck Mr. O'Keefe on January 29, 2022, around 12:32 a.m.?
Objection, Your Honor.
Going to another.
I can answer? Yes, based on the totality of the evidence, DNA, everything I've talked about, that is consistent with that happening with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. That is what happened.
Objection, move to strike, Your
So
Honor.
I'm going to strike that. I'm going to see counsel's have just.
Now, will a jury believe it? I guess it depends on whether they can be swayed by the emotion, the betrayals, the blue wall of silence, or if they'll zero in on what Welcher gave us: data, patterns, physics, paint, timelines. In a trial where truth seems buried beneath conspiracy and chaos, this may be the one day the evidence actually spoke louder than the outrage. Well, that's it for today's episode of Profiling Evil. Thanks for hanging in with me as we work through one of the most intense days of the Karen Reed trial. I really appreciate each of you, even those that are disagreeing with me, whether you agree or disagree, or you're just trying to make sense of it all. I want you to know I've spent a career inside this system and I still believe in it. But I'm also not blind to its flaws. Corruption exists. Bias exists. And when it does, it needs to be rooted out. But so does the truth. So let's keep digging into the facts together, step by step. Because if we let emotion take the wheel, we just might miss what the evidence is actually telling us. And in the end, it may not make a difference in the courtroom, but it does make a difference in how we understand justice. So now, if you haven't already, take a minute, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you prefer your true crime on the go, don't forget to check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And hey, I want to take a moment and say a heartfelt thank you to all of you who have purchased my book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. Last week, I had the incredible opportunity to attend the ribbon cutting of a brand new Children's Justice Center. It's pictured here. In attendance were many of the survivors that we rescued from the Zion Society cult more than 34 years ago. Two of those survivors shared their stories at the ribbon cutting, and folks, their words were moving beyond measure. It was a full circle moment for me, and if you'd like to read Deceived, you can get a signed copy at profilingevil.com. And if you live in the United States, I'm going to ship it to you and sign it for free. Now, international folks, you're going to have to go to Amazon to get it, but you can get it anywhere in the world. And don't forget to check out my other book, She Knew No Fear, the story of my great-great-grandmother's murder in 1891, and how I solved that murder 130 years later. It is a powerful journey of grit, loss, and determination. And stay tuned for my new book, which is dropping next month. I think you're going to really find this a fascinating read, and I can't wait to share it with you. Hey, thanks again for supporting Profiling Evil. Keep asking questions, keep staying curious, and stay focused on these cases, but try to do so without a preconceived notion. Something that I fight with every single day, but I really do try. Hey, we'll see you soon. at the next crime scene.